Good morning, all. The Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, Minister of Public Utilities, Mrs. Dawn Callender, Chairman of the Regulated Industries Commission, Board of Commissioners of the Regulated Industries Commission, Mr. Glenn Kahn, Executive Director, Regulated Industries Commission, Dr. Adrian Kashman, Deputy Chairman, Technical Committee, Global Water Partnership Caribbean, Mr. Keith Mead, Senior Manager, Water Resources Agency, distinguished speakers and presenters, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning again, and welcome to the second installment of the RIC's webinar series. This webinar intends to provide a platform for dialogue and exchange of information centering around the theme Sustainable Water Delivery in Trinidad and Tobago. I am Drisa Ramjan, the Corporate Communications Manager at the Regulated Industries Commission, and I will be your chairperson this morning for the first part of our session. I would now like to invite Mr. Glenn Kahn, our Executive Director at the RIC, to deliver some welcome remarks. Mr. Kahn?
Thank you, Drizel. Good morning. The Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, Minister of Public Utilities, Mrs. Dawn Callender, Chairman of the Regulated Industries Commission and members of the Board of the Commission, our distinguished external speakers, Dr. Adrian Kashman of Global Water Partnerships Caribbean, and Mr. Keith Mead of the Water Resources Agencies, our more than 200 participants from throughout the Caribbean and locally in Trinidad and Tobago, staff of the RIC, members of the media. On behalf of the board, the chairman and the board of commissioners, I bid you a welcome to our second webinar on sustainable water delivery. The issue of sustainable water, or water on the whole, is not something that anybody has to tell you about its importance. Water is essential for life, and that is enough to say with regard to how important it is. But in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, the issue of water is a thorny one and raises a lot of emotions. And it's not recent. I don't know how many people in the audience were around in 1971 when Balraj Devsaran was elected as a member of parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. But there's a joke around Balraj Devsaran that had to do with water. Somebody asked him, Mr. Devsaran, what do you think about Watergate? And he said, well, stop playing the fool, you know. That's just to give you an idea of how long ago the issue of water was making the headlines and what people thought about it. In more recent time, you know, there have been numerous complaints from members of the public about this issue, and it has been engaging the political directorate in the recent past in this new cycle of the politics. So it's now front and center, and we thought that we should address this because of its importance, and we have invited two eminent persons who will be presenting the ideas of their organization on how this issue will be treated with, and our own staff here at the RIC, in fulfilling our regulatory mandate, will present the ideas that the RIC has for how we go about this. So I hope that you will stay with us for most of the period during which this session goes on. and we'll welcome your interaction with us during the question and answer period. I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to your participation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for those welcoming words. I would now like to invite Mrs. Dawn Callender, Chairman of the Regulated Industries Commission, to deliver her opening remarks. Chair.
Good morning. All protocols having been observed, it's my pleasure to bring the opening remarks at this, the second in the RIC's webinar series. These webinars, perhaps one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic, have become an efficient way of educating and interacting with the public. As the economic regulator of the water and wastewater sectors in Trinidad and Tobago, the RIC will seek to provide the public with the context against which we conduct our reviews, and we will keep the public informed on such issues and concerns as the general global progress towards attaining the climate change goals, as well as the 2015 United Nations Development Goals, and how these affect us here in Trinidad and Tobago. This morning, our webinar will focus on the 6th Sustainable Development Goal, clean water and sanitation. It is one of the broad policy objectives that influences the conversations on water sustainability. As we know, water scarcity affects perhaps around 40% of the world's population. And I'm sure our audience will agree this is an alarming figure, especially as it is projected to rise as temperatures increase. Climate change is not the only variable impacting our concern for water sustainability. Population growth and changing lifestyles, especially the consumption of meat in our diets, which place a great stress on water consumption. To quote but one statistic, it takes 17 times more water to produce a pound of meat compared to a pound of wheat. Here at home in Trinidad and Tobago, we are fortunate to be considered well water resource. However, the key question for policymakers remains, what can we do to establish and maintain a reliable, sustainable water supply? Our first priority should be to ensure we have a system that can adequately supply the immediate and long-term water needs of the country. This must involve a sequence of combined actions and not isolated strategies. These strategies must begin with assessing the current needs and determining what must be done to bring the infrastructure up to the standard to meet these needs. The second issue is to ensure that water is used and managed efficiently, both by customers and the utility. Efficiency strategies must include such ideas as better accounting for water, perhaps the use of bulk meters to identify losses due to leakage, and of course, following up by repairing them promptly. We should also ensure that customers pay a rate that is based on the amount of water used, and that the rates they are charged send the appropriate price signals to incentivize efficient use. As consumers, we can contribute to these efforts by fixing leaks on our premises promptly, installing efficient clothes washers, and using the washing machines for full loads. Of course, we always advise about the need to reduce our long and lingering showers that we presently take. Thirdly, we would have to ensure that any gains achieved are sustainable. And that is not sufficient to simply fix the system, but we need to ensure that the system remains adequately funded and there are mechanisms in place to ensure good governance. In this regard, accountability by the utility for its level of performance and assuring the public of measures being implemented to address underperformance would be critical ideas. In closing, I am sure you agree having a sustainable water delivery is a long-term goal, which is achievable, but we must begin to address it today. We must invest in adequate infrastructure and encourage our populations to shift their mindsets. All of this would go towards creating a reliable supply for us today and water security for future generations. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Minister of Public Utilities, the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, to contribute to these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Is everyone hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mrs. Dawn Callender, the Chairman of the Regulated Industries Commission, the Board of Commissioners of the Regulated Industries Commission, Mr. Glenn Kahn, the Executive Director of the Regulated Industries Commission, Dr. Adrian Kashman, the Deputy Chairman of the Technical Committee on Global Water Partnership of the Caribbean, Mr. Keith Mead, the Senior Manager of the Water Resources Agency of the Water and Sewage Authority, distinguished speakers and presenters, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today to share and discuss a major issue in Trinidad and Tobago and the world that has engaged a significant amount of my time and attention since I was appointed Minister of Public Utilities. The issue in ensuring that our country has a reliable and sustainable supply of water through a system that is able to efficiently and satisfactorily meet the water needs of all citizens today. It must also secure the sustainable water future of generations to come. A safe and reliable supply of potable water is essential to the social and economic development of this country, and all countries for that matter, and the general well-being of the world's population. On a global scale, according to the UN, having sustainable water means providing each person on the planet with affordable access to an absolute, or rather a minimum of 50 to 100 liters of water daily. This allows the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is to, quote, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, end quote. And the UN General Assembly's recognition of the right to safe and clean drinking water and sanitation as human right that is essential for the full enjoyment of life and all human rights. This, however, is no easy task, not only here in Trinidad and Tobago, but around the globe, as a 40% projected shortfall in fresh water resources by 2030 and a projected rise in world population will push the world nearer to a global water crisis. Currently, 785 million people worldwide lack access to clean drinking water and that's 1 in every 10 people on the planet. These statistics become even more concerning when we factor in escalating threats such as climate change, human population growth, species extinction, and deforestation, all of which contribute to the degradation of fresh water systems around the world. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is aware of the urgency of this situation, and the Ministry of Public Utilities is actively working towards the development of an integrated resource management system that will consider these global threats and address the challenges that exist within the local water sector. An efficiently run water supply network is critical to supplying water to communities. However, sustainable supply of water is increasingly jeopardized by aging water transmission infrastructure, wastage of excessive water, loss of water through non-revenue water and theft, and the effects of climate change. As I have said on numerous occasions in the past and will repeat again, we are not a water scarce country. On an annual basis, Trinidad receives an average of 2,100 millimeters of rain, and Tobago is slightly wetter with an average of 2,500 millimeters. This is a significant amount of annual rainfall. Another significant fact is that Trinidad and Tobago groundwater or water from wells account for approximately 30% of the Water and Sewerage Authority's total water production. However, inefficiencies in the management of our water resources have, over time, led to a water sector that is unable to deliver a reliable or adequate supply of water to our population. Currently, only 45% of WASA's customers in Trinidad and Tobago receive a 24/7 supply, whereas the remaining 55 to 60% receive a scheduled and intermittent supply, with some of them receiving water less than 2 days a week. Given our access to water, this is unacceptable. Despite these challenges, due to recent investments in the sector over the last 6 months, over 100,000 citizens in approximately 22 communities around our country saw improvements to their water supply as a result of the successful execution of the ministry's Community Water Improvement Program, or CWIP. In many instances, some of these communities, example, North Manzanilla, Guayco Tamina, Mari Road in Mova, Thomas Trace in Losiro, just to name a few, received water for the very first time. Today, the statistics show that approximately 65% of our citizens receive a water supply between 24/4 to 24/7. By the end of this financial year, as we seek to implement several more projects under this very successful program, I anticipate that over 70% of the population will receive, or rather will have, a water supply between 24/4 and 24/7. Recently, Cabinet approved a strategic action plan for water supply delivery to the population over the next 3 years. I am confident that once we aggressively pursue the plans and the initiatives under this action plan, WASA will be poised to achieving some of the benchmarks set by the RIC in the draft quality of service standards. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Public Utilities and the Board of Commissioners of WASA are working collaboratively to transform the utility and address WASA's infrastructure challenges with the aim of securing a reasonable good quality supply of water now and well into the future. It must be noted that water is an all-encompassing universal resource, and its management is not solely under WASA's control. Other sectors like health, agriculture, manufacturing, industry, and energy are also dependent on it. And other factors, economic, organizational, historical, and cultural, play integral roles in shaping the local water sector. The Integrated Water Resources Management Policy will address these factors, as well as the interrelated roles that various stakeholders play in the sector. We are also pursuing several other initiatives to improve water supply to our population. And some of the projects that we have already embarked upon is the introduction of modern modular water treatment plants. To address some of these issues faced by the water utility with regard to the increased production to satisfy current and future demand, the Ministry of Public Utilities has engaged international partners for the establishment of a modular water treatment plants in central, or rather modular water treatment plants in central and south Trinidad. Modular systems utilizing modern technology allow for your treatment capacity to scale with your needs, eliminating the need for massive upfront capital investment in large plants or systems. The modular plant is expected to take approximately 6 months to operationalize, as opposed to the several years it would take to construct a traditional water treatment plant. And once completed, they can produce up to 20 million gallons of water collectively, thus addressing water shortfalls and access in affected communities. The ministry is hoping to set up around 10 of these modular water treatment plants in strategic locations throughout Trinidad and Tobago to address the demand in these areas for a regular and a reliable supply of water. The National Rainwater Harvesting Program. The Ministry of Public Utilities also recently signed a memorandum of an agreement for the National Rainwater Harvesting Program. And this program will seek to utilize rainwater harvesting as a low-cost, quick-win solution to alleviate the supply woes of communities that are either unserved or underserved by WASA, and to build the resilience of communities to climate change and natural disasters. With respect to water tariffs, it is important to note that investments in modular water treatment plants and new technology systems, preventative maintenance of existing infrastructure, repair and upgrade of pipelines, booster stations, etc., require significant capital. And it is a well-known fact that in Trinidad and Tobago, the Water and Sewage Authority has not had an increase in rates, or rather revised rates, in 28 years, and currently depends heavily on government subventions to fund its day-to-day operations. This cannot continue. And if we intend to provide an efficient and sustainable water delivery system throughout the country, we must have a rate review. It is in light of this that WASA recently completed its business plan, its cost of service study, a capital investment program, and within the coming weeks, will submit this information to the RIC as an application and a justification for a rate review in Trinidad and Tobago. The intention is to increase the quality of service to all WASA customers, which will give the customer value for money and a fair return to WASA to fund its continued investments in the water sector. These are just some of the few interventions being pursued to ensure that we in Trinidad and Tobago can have a sustainable water sector for our citizens to meet the ever-growing needs of the population, as well as to ensure economic and social prosperity for our country. I wish to thank the Regulated Industries Commission for its continued partnership in this regard. The role of the Commission is integral towards ensuring water sustainability in Trinidad and Tobago, and we at the Ministry of Public Utilities appreciate the collaboration among the various stakeholders. In conclusion, let me take the opportunity to wish each of you a happy and holy Easter. And may the message of Easter ignite our hope as a nation and strengthen our resolve to continue our collaboration as we seek to craft a sustainable water supply and a water future for all our citizens. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for those insightful remarks. It is at this juncture that my duty as host comes to an end, and I will now hand you over to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Cornell Motley, Standards Engineer at the RIC, who will be your moderator for the remainder of this morning's session. Thank you all, and I hope you have an informative and enjoyable time with us this morning. Cornell?
Thank you, Giselle. All protocols observed, I wish to again welcome the 100+ viewers on Zoom and Facebook to what promises to be a very informative and engaging event. And I hope that the following presentations will help inform viewers about the management of water use and what needs to be done by the various parties to ensure that we and our future generations have an adequate supply of water. According to the United Nations, in the last century, water use has been growing globally at more than twice the rate of population increase. And an increasing number of regions around the world are reaching the limit at which water services can be sustainably delivered, especially in the dry and arid regions. We can therefore all agree that today's discussion should be of concern to each and every one of us. Viewers, we look forward to your active participation throughout today's proceedings, and your questions are welcome. For the viewers on Zoom, please submit your questions using the question and answer feature at any time throughout the webinar. And for viewers on Facebook, you can use the chat facility. We shall seek to answer as many of your questions during the panel discussion and the question and answer segment of the program. And any questions not answered at that time will be subsequently answered via the RIC's online platforms. I will now introduce our first guest presenter, Dr. Adrian Kashman, who has over 40 years of experience in the water sector. He has been working in the Caribbean, based in Barbados for the past 15 years, first with the University of the West Indies, and now as an international consultant. Projects he has worked on include, among many, Grenada's National Ecosystems Assessment, the updating of Jamaica's water sector policy and implementation plan, and the preparation and update of the Regional Strategic Action Implementation Plan for Water. Prior to 2018, he spent 12 years with the University of the West Indies and served as the director of the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies. Before joining that organization, he worked in the water sector in the United Kingdom as a research fellow and also worked in sub-Saharan Africa in government and consulting. In Namibia, he was the head of water supply operations and the head of civil design with the Department of Water Affairs in Namibia, which included 6 years in water resources planning. Dr. Kashman's published works cover a diverse range of fields, including critical accounting, geography, water and climate change, water policy, resource management, and future studies. He has worked with a wide range of international and regional organizations on water and climate-related matters. Up until 2022, he was a member of the Global Water Partnership's Technical Advisory Committee, and he continues to serve the Caribbean as Deputy Chair of the GWPC's Technical Committee. In 2020, he received the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association Gold Award for services to the Caribbean water sector. His presentation today is on the recent developments in the integrated water resources management in the Caribbean. I now invite Dr. Kashman to begin his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those few remarks. And I'm sharing about to share my Apologies for that slight technical delay there. So first of all protocols having been observed, I will launch straight into my presentation. Although, just to underline the importance of water, just today in Barbados, where I live, the general manager of the Barbados Water Authority addressed the private sector, industries and commerce, warning them that in their planning, they should be including water management as part of their strategic management of their businesses. And this just underlines, I think, the growing challenges that we are all across the Caribbean facing when it comes to water management and the supply of water that is not only used for domestic purposes, but also to keep our economies running. I'm just going to share with you a little bit of background about Global Water Partnership Caribbean. It is not the main focus of my presentation, but Global Water Partnership, which includes the Caribbean, has been a leading advocate for integrated water resources management since the 1990s. And as an organization, it has provided intellectual leadership on this subject across the globe. We are a non-governmental organization with 13 regional arms. We're headquartered in Stockholm, and we have, through the Global Water Partnership organization there. We both have an operational arm and a technical arm, which is, as the last speaker indicated, that I have been part of for about 7 years up until this year. In terms of the Global Water Partnership Caribbean, we're a network of over 120 partners in more than 24 Caribbean countries. And we're dedicated to promoting and fostering integrated water resources management approaches across the Caribbean. And our partners include water utilities, government agencies, the private sector, NGOs, and youth. And I am mentioning youth particularly because it's one of the areas that we have been focusing on and trying to engage youth in the water sector and in water resources management. Our vision, obviously, is to have a water-secure Caribbean. And I note in the opening remarks from many of our speakers that water security has been mentioned a number of times. Global Water Partnership, our mission is to support countries in the sustainable development and management of their water resources at all levels, whether it's at the community, the national, or the regional level. And we want to see this done through the promotion and adoption of integrated water resources management. Our work includes, as I've mentioned, advocacy, convening power, and by that we mean bringing different parties together around the table to discuss the issues and challenges we face around water management and looking to develop cooperative solutions to those challenges. We also can support that through our technical expertise, knowledge sharing. One of the benefits of having an organization such as Global Water Partnership Caribbean is that we can bring not only regional partners and their expertise together, but we can go out to our global partners and bring their expertise to the table. That's one part of it. Capacity building is another major part of what we do. Committed to building awareness at the community, national, and regional levels at all across the Caribbean. So that's a little bit about Global Water Partnership Caribbean. I want now to get into the substance of my discussion with you today. And I would rather characterize it as a discussion because it's not going to be offering solutions. It will be giving an overview, but I think this is part of the discussion that we have been having and that we need continue to have. I'm not going to be talking about integrated water resources management as a philosophy or a theoretical construct. As an ex-academic, I think I left that behind. I want to be talking about what has actually been happening. And one of the things I would like to share with you is that a lot actually has been happening. We've heard from the minister just now of the number of interventions and projects and programs that are being put in place to address the challenges of ensuring access to water, not only now, but into the future for our children and our children's children. But there are many challenges to that. One of the things that gives me hope is that after what seems like many, many years of inertia in the water sector in the Caribbean, things are actually moving. They're ramping up. When you look across the Caribbean, countries are beginning to invest at the level that is going to make a significant difference in their water sectors. That's not to say that we have solved all the problems. We still have got a long way to go. Water resources management is a process that promotes coordination, management of water, land, and related resources to maximize economic and social welfare in an equitable manner. The minister referred to the number of people across the world that do not have secure water supplies. That says to me that it is an affront to human dignity that we are not able to satisfy a basic human right. And for me, that underlines the urgency that we should be feeling about addressing these problems. Some of the historical background to integrated water resources management in the Caribbean, or actually starting in the more global context, is it came to the fore in the 1992 Dublin Conference on Water and Environment and was later picked up by the first Rio Summit there. IWRM is based on Dublin principles, 4 principles, which are very briefly: water is a vulnerable and scarce resource. Water management should be participatory. Women play a central role in water management, and water has an economic value. Although each of these should be self-evident to us, turning those principles into practice has been an ongoing challenge. And I think that that challenge is manifest in how long it has been taking us to really ramp up what we've been doing. In the Caribbean, I would trace back our interest or the uptick in interest in IWRM to the meeting in 2008 of CARICOM ministers, the Council for Trade and Economic Development, which recognized that there was a need for a common approach to water resources management to develop and strengthen national policies. IWRM, and again, has already been mentioned, water use efficiency plans. That was back in 2008. It led to the idea of a consortium of CARICOM institutions for water, tasked with developing a common water framework. That was back in 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still talking about that consortium of institutions and a common water framework. Just to illustrate, nearly 20 years on, to illustrate how long it is taking us to move to the next level of our management of our water resources. IWRM is open to interpretation. And I think this is important to understand this because it can be an ecological perspective, and this is pushed by some, but alternatively, it is integration into national planning and development. And I think, and I'm going to speak these are private, these are my own perspectives. I think this is where we have been lagging behind, is the integration of water and water planning into national planning, into economic planning and development. And I think that is one reason why the level of financing, which is now beginning to flow, has not been there to address some of the challenges that we have. Some of the challenges we have, and as an ex-academic, we love to talk about the theory, but it's about the implementation. And we've often thought of IWRM as a package, that we have to have all the elements of the package. And for many years, we have focused on that. And I think focused wrongly. We need to look at it in terms, not just as a package, but look at what we can achieve and build on what we can achieve. So what has been happening over these 15 odd years, nearly 20 years in some cases? We've had a number of IWRM roadmaps in countries across the Caribbean. Many of these lovely documents have sat there and gathered dust. The Integrated Watersheds and Coastal Area Management, a GEF program, back in the mid-2000s, started to really, I think, bring greater focus to IWRM. And it certainly, in terms of advocacy across the region, I think led to a renewed interest, certainly amongst the professionals and those associated with the water sector. But it seemed to remain very much within the water sector, and we weren't integrating with the rest of society. And by that, I include the political engagement with the political directorate and decision makers. We've learned, I hope, some of our lessons, and we are beginning to address that. The other, I think, catalyst has been the Caribbean Communities Climate Change Center's Regional Climate Change Strategic Framework and its implementation, because that includes a lot of the identification of a lot of interventions that are needed in the water sector to underpin development resilience. At the national level, and I'm just picking one or two out, examples, just to give you a flavor that things are moving across the Caribbean. In Dominica, we have the Water Sector Strategic Development Plan that is looking at strategic options, institutional strengthening, water resources management. In Grenada, you have the G-Cruise project, which is funded through the Green Climate Fund, which is strengthening water governance, infrastructure upgrades, and also, like WASA, looking to improve financial viability of the sector. In Jamaica, we have the National Water Policy and Implementation Plan. One of the, I think, the significant things about this is that responsibility for this plan lies within a ministry that is under the purview of the Prime Minister. In other words, it is receiving the highest level of political oversight that you could wish for. And I think this is important. It tries to, looking at improved coordination, monitoring and evaluation, recognizing that if you do not monitor and evaluate, you are in a poor position to set more realistic goals and what needs to be done. And it also includes the private sector. In Trinidad and Tobago, I won't go into that. The minister has mentioned more eloquently than I could what the country is doing. At a regional level, there's been quite a lot happening. There's the Regional Strategic Action Plan for Governance and Climate Resilience in the water sector, which has been supported by the Inter-American Development Bank and is being the sort of secretariat, if I can put it that way, is the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association has been performing a coordinating function on that. There's the pilot project for climate resilience, both at the regional level, and also there are country programs as well. There are the Global Environment Facility funded regional programs, such as Integrating Water, Land and Ecosystem Management, which has got a very, very strong IWRM component. There's the CREW Plus project, integrating water and wastewater management, looking at supporting and moving forward wastewater management, not only at the utility level, but at the community level as well. And there are many other initiatives as well. There's a continuing work of my own organization, the Global Water Partnership Caribbean, and some of the things that we've been doing in trying to promote and integrate youth into water resources management. There's the work of the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, CAR for the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and many, many others. And my apologies for leaving some out. However, that's the good news, but I would like to offer a bit of a critique of what I've been seeing. I see a duplication of effort between programs, not only at a national level, but at a regional level as well. A wheel that keeps being reinvented. Many of the things that have been mentioned earlier on this morning have been talked about for the last 15 years or more. So if we've known about these, why are we still talking about it today? The only thing I would say that we have added is more of an emphasis on climate change. But aging infrastructure, not realistic water rates. These are things that we've been talking about for a long time now. Why have we not addressed them? There's been the high-level forum of ministers with responsibility for water. Yes, it is a platform for bringing ministers together. But how much has it really achieved? And I'm not going to try and answer that question because there are many answers to that. There is a continuing emphasis on in-sector integration as opposed to across sectors. We're getting better at that across sector, but there's another dimension of integration, and that's integration from the highest decision-making level, the political level, to the community level. And this is something that I think we are struggling to make inroads into. Recent initiatives have recognized the need for ownership and buy-in, and some of the earlier work, regional work, why did it fall away when the funding went away was because of this, I would say, a lack of ownership there. And sorry, I lost my screen. And some of the challenges that we have are the challenges of climate change and water security, things that we've talked about. And some of the questions I have is, what is the role of IWRM in meeting some of these challenges? I think it's still work in progress. IWRM is a concept, is something that water sector professionals have been advocating for a long time. We are getting to the stage now where that advocacy is beginning to yield results, and we are beginning to be listened to by decision makers beyond the water sector, by decision makers in finance and in other related sectors as well, such as has been mentioned, health, agriculture, and many others. Well, so we do have a long way to go. My closing message is that we have made a lot of progress, and we are seeing it at the regional and national level, but we still haven't solved a lot of our problems. And I've taken a very broad view of this. I've deliberately not gone into specific details, but I would be happy to go into those details if there are questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kashman, for presenting the regional context to today's discussion, and I look forward to a lively discourse during the panel discussion. Viewers, we wish to apologize for the difficulty we had with sharing Dr. Kashman's slides. We will share them with you all via email or via our online platform so that you will have access to this presentation. Our second guest presenter is Mr. Keith Mead, who has over 24 years of experience in the water sector in Trinidad and Tobago, where he has held various positions at the Water and Sewerage Authority and the Water Resources Agency, the WRA. He currently holds the position of Senior Manager at the Water Resources Agency. The Water Resources Agency was appended to WASA in 1976 and is responsible for the measurement and reporting of rainfall, stream flow, groundwater, evaporation, and water quality parameters. Using data and information collected from strategically located sites throughout Trinidad and Tobago, trends are computed in the quantity and quality of the surface and groundwater resources required for social and economic development and the protection of the environmental quality in the country. With the advent of an integrated approach to water resources management, the WRA collaborates with many stakeholders, such as the Environmental Management Authority, the Ministry of Works and Transport Drainage Division, the Ministry of Food Production, Land and Marine Resources, the Ministry of Public Utilities, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, and the Meteorological Services of Trinidad and Tobago, as it seeks to ensure the sustainability of Trinidad and Tobago's water resources. I now invite Mr. Mead to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much to our moderator, Mr. Motley. A very good morning to everyone. This morning, I'd like to take us through an overview of the water resources that are in the country. Exactly how much do we have and what's the quality? And then to look at a couple of the challenges that we are faced with, and also to present a few suggestions as to how those challenges could be overcome in terms of ensuring a sustainable water delivery. The Honorable Minister mentioned this morning that the country has quite a lot of rainfall. And I'd just like to take us through that quickly this morning. And he did mention that for both islands, we are in excess of 2 million millimeters per year, which actually is quite a lot of rainfall. And so really, Trinidad and Tobago, we are a blessed nation in terms of the amount of rainfall that we do have. There's a little problem, however, and that is between the difference between dry season and wet season. As you know, we are going through the dry season at this moment. There's a significant fall off in rainfall between the wet season and the dry season. You would be seeing on your screens two maps from the meteorological services, which shows the difference between those two and the amounts of rainfall which occur in both seasons. During the wet season, we get somewhere around 75% of our total rainfall, and that drops off significantly during the dry season. And of course, not only do we have this problem of wet season, dry season, but also in terms of the distribution of that rainfall. For Trinidad, for example, most of that rainfall will occur in the northeast of the country, most to the northeast, and in Tobago around the mid-ridge of the island. How much of it do we really have? Well, our water resources could be looked at as three sources. I'd like to add a third one: surface water, groundwater, which we are used to. And I'd like to add the third one, which is our coastal waters, which are becoming more and more important. And this has to also be seen as a source of available water for use. On your screens now, you'll be seeing a slide which shows how much surface and groundwater we have. At least these are from measurements during the period 2018 to 2021. And from this slide, you could see that we have over 3,000 odd 100 million cubic meters of water shared between surface water and groundwater. Of course, most of that comes from surface water. You would notice from 2018 to 2021 that the figure is the same, and that's because we need to do some more work in terms of measuring our surface water. How much of that is withdrawn? If we look at our slide again, down at the bottom, you will see that we withdraw somewhere around 9 to 10% of the fresh water that is available. So we do have quite a significant amount of water still in reserve as fresh water. The estimates which I gave you would have been done by the Water Resources Agency. Another estimate which is similar to our estimate, so we have the assurance that our figures are reasonable, was done by the FAO, and their figure is 3,840 million cubic meters per year that is available to the country. 79% of that is collected in our river and surface water sources. The other 21% gets into the ground and is collected in our groundwater systems. So how much water is available per person, per capita? So each person in this country has, well, I shouldn't say available to them, but per capita, it's 7.5 cubic meters per person per day, which works out to be about 1,650 gallons per person per day that is available. That's way more, than we really need. So based on the information that I've given, and according to the international standards, Trinidad and Tobago is by no means a water-stressed country. We have far more water than we actually need in terms of fresh water. How is that water used? The water that is abstracted from the various sources is used primarily in 3 areas. The major abstractor of the resource, of course, is the service provider, the Water and Sewerage Authority, and they abstract somewhere about 96% of what is abstracted. The agriculture only accounts for 1%, and industrial and commercial another 3%. Now, of course, some of the water that's abstracted by WASA is used by industrial and, of course, agricultural users. We are in a sort of, compared to most countries, we are sort of different. Most countries, agriculture accounts for most of the water that's withdrawn. But in Trinidad and Tobago, that's a little bit different. In terms of water quality, we've talked about the quantity now. What about the quality? Well, we have some maps here that shows us what has been happening to our quality of our water between 1999 and 2014. The map of Trinidad will show you as we move along from 1999 all the way up that there has been an increase in the level of pollution that has been taking place. And if you're familiar with the map and the various geographical locations, you'll recognize that most of the areas that you're seeing in brown there, which are the urban built up areas, these are the areas where we have a predominance of deterioration in water quality. In terms of Tobago, well, in 1999, it was more or less pristine, and that has degenerated to what we have now in that map that we see there in 2010. So there's a progressive deterioration in the quality of our resource. So having mentioned the quantity and quality, what are some of the challenges that we face in water resources? Some of these were mentioned by our previous speakers and by the Honorable Minister, of course. One, population growth, and with it comes increases in housing development. and other industrial activities. Secondly, the degradation in watersheds, increases in erosion, landslides, quarrying, poor waste disposals. Thirdly, pollution of our water courses in terms of dumping of solid waste, pesticides, whatever. And you could just look around the country and almost in every waterway that you come across, somebody dumps a fridge, somebody dumps something into it. The next area is degradation of our wetlands. And we're seeing this like the Caroni Swamp, a number of our swamps or other wetland areas where we have in degradation of these in these particular areas. Seasonal rainfall, I mentioned that before, that the rainfall is seasonal, wet season, dry season, 70% taking place during the wet season. The other area of concern is the culture of our country with respect to, of our people with respect to water resources. So we need to look at conservation, sustainable management of our resource. I know many of us who probably would have traveled, if you go overseas, you use water differently than you would use it in Trinidad. And whereas we would leave taps on, we would, have overrunning tanks, etc. Using the hose, have it running on the ground. You just don't do that in other countries. So just to highlight again, the issues of watershed degradation due to things like indiscriminate quarrying, slash and burn agriculture, unplanned land development for residential uses, industrials and others. Flooding. Flooding is increasingly becoming of concern in Trinidad and Tobago. We can say that we can expect significant floods now every year. And this is leading to extensive damage to both property, crops, and a number of things, making roads impassable, etc. The coastal zone. A lot of us enjoy the beaches, but our use of the beaches and how we use them leaves much to be desired. On the coast, we tend to have things like coastal eutrophication because of inadequate sewage treatment, contamination from agricultural pollution, sea level rise, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, or which is becoming of an increasing concern, sand mining along the beaches, oil spills, overfishing, and other forms of degradation. In general, the water quality, both in terms of surface water, the problem is there for all to see. In terms of groundwater, you're not seeing the effects so much except for things like saltwater intrusion, which we'll find in some of our aquifers, as in, say, for example, Mayaro. And we're seeing that a little bit now in the Diego Martin area. And so there is some concerns on some parts of Tobago. Let me move now to climate change. Climate change is a creeping crisis. It's just creeping up on us. And what are the predicted impacts of climate change? First of all, for Trinidad, the predictions are that we can expect a 30% reduction in rainfall. In fact, by 2050, it's projected that there will be a 14% reduction in rainfall and a 5% increase in evaporation. And by the year 2100, there will be a further 21% reduction in rainfall and 8% in potential evaporation. So against that background, how do we engage in a sustainable water delivery? What does that really mean? So sustainable water delivery says that we should provide adequate water quantity and appropriate quality for a given need. And there are various needs, industrial, domestic, and so on, without compromising the future ability to provide this capacity and quality. So we want to use it, but not compromise it for future generations. So what is a water supply system which is sustainable? And one that is sustainable says, let us be efficient on both sides. What do I mean by both sides? On the demand side and the supply side of things, we need to be efficient. In terms of demand, we need to be continuously measuring our demand requirements. What are those figures? How much, what is our demand? How much do we expect that to change in the coming years? We need to change the attitudes and our behaviors regarding water use. Years ago, I remember at a conference saying, and that time the UN was saying that water will be called the new gold in the future. And we're seeing that happening more and more. So our attitudes towards the resource need to change. We need to start using water-saving devices, appliances in our homes to minimize consumptions and losses. We also need to have economic incentives, and the minister referred to tariffs and charges that need to be applied to the resource if we are to ensure that we have the kinds of infrastructure that is needed to provide a sustainable supply. We need to measure consumption regularly. How much are we consuming? Well, the information we have is that we probably consume, on the average, an individual person probably, when compared to a developed country, probably about 4 times as much water as those persons. The supply side, improving efficiency. And again, the minister referred to initiatives that are being undertaken by the service provider at this time to do that. Being more efficient at our plants, measuring supply. We need to know how much we are actually supplying, how much water is being provided. Losses, accounting for the losses. Leaks not only from the transmission and distribution end of things, but also in homes. Detecting those leaks and repairing them quickly. What about storage? We need to store more water. I just said that 75% of the rainfall occurs during the wet season. We need to store that. And pricing. Pricing encourages conservation, proper pricing. So how do we move forward? We just clearly stated that Trinidad and Tobago is by no means, it's not a water-stressed nation. So what is missing? We need to do proper planning and proper management of the resource. And we did hear early on that we are making some headways in this direction, but I would like to say that we are late and we do have to play catch up. So we need to establish an integrated framework for water resources and wastewater management, and the minister referred to this. We need to protect and manage our watersheds, our aquifers and wetlands, all of our resources, which extends even to the coastlines, coastal waters, or forests, or rivers, or wetlands, or coastal areas. We need to build resilience so that we would have a water-secure future for Trinidad and Tobago. Minimize and mitigate the impacts of flooding and drought and other water-related emergencies. Ensure a fair and efficient allocation of water among all users. We also need to promote the use of appropriate technology so that we will be able to foster proper sustainable water resources management. And you know, here I would really like to say that the initiative by the ministry in implementing a system that we have all known for years, which is rainwater harvesting, collecting water from your roofs. This is something that needs to extend throughout the country, collecting water at the individual locations. So in closing, we need to manage abstraction rates, land use planning, and we need to build resilience to climate change. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mead, for pointing out to us the activities currently taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm sure that our viewers will post questions based on your presentation. I wish to remind viewers that your questions on the issues raised today are welcome. And I'm very happy to see a lively discourse going on in the question and answer section and the chat section on the Zoom platform. So keep your comments and feedback coming in. We are now at the stage of the program where members of the staff of the RIC will give 2 presentations on the issues of water efficiency and universal water metering in Trinidad and Tobago, respectively. Viewers who are interested in the information that will be presented can visit the RIC's website, www.ric.org.tt, to read and download the published documents which provide the basis for what you're about to hear. I now welcome Mr. Rishi Maraj, Assistant Executive Director, Economics and Research, to begin his presentation on sustainable water, advancing water efficiency in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. The title of my presentation is Sustainable Water, Advancing Water Efficiency in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to acknowledge the research work of Ms. Ariane Phillip, Tariff Analyst at the RIC, whose work I drew heavily upon to prepare this presentation. The outline of my presentation will take the following structure. First, I will give a quick background and context for the concept of water use efficiency. Then I will briefly explain what it means and its relevance as a topic of discussion, followed by how it is measured. I will examine the case for water use efficiency in Trinidad and Tobago and some challenges to becoming more water use efficient. Finally, I will share some proposals for advancing water use efficiency, which can be implemented by the various stakeholders in the local water sector. The United Nations adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, which were designed to unite nations in the common cause of ensuring general welfare of all humans by the year 2030. SDG 6 focuses on ensuring a clean and stable water supply and effective water sanitation for all people by the year 2030, because many people across the world lack these basic services. It is estimated that 40% of the world's population is affected by lack of water, and this problem is only expected to worsen with climate change. There are a number of sub-goals under SDG 6, one of which is SDG 6.4, which says by 2030, substantially increase water use efficiency across all sectors and ensure sustainable withdrawals and supply of fresh water to address water scarcity, and substantially reduce the number of people suffering from water scarcity. 11 indicators were developed to monitor and track the progress of countries in their pursuit of these goals. One of these indicators measures how efficiently countries use water. Water use efficiency is key to fostering sustainable water use. From an economic perspective, it implies obtaining more value with the available water resources by reducing consumption and reducing the pollution and environmental impact of water use. In general, water use efficiency means doing more and better with less water. Improving water use efficiency means increasing water productivity by reducing the intensity of water use for socio-economic activities, by improving the allocation of water among competing uses to obtain greater value per drop of water, and improving the technical efficiency of water services and management efficiency of their provision. Water use efficiency differs from water conservation since it focuses on reducing wastage of water and not on restricting use. How is water use efficiency measured? Under SDG 6, a water use efficiency indicator was developed, which measures the value added from the use of water by people, by sectors, and the economy as a whole. National water use efficiency indicators are computed based on sectoral values for agriculture, for industry, and service sectors. The use of water by households is reflected under the services sector, while industry captures manufacturing, mining, construction, and energy. The contribution of each sector to the national indicator is weighted by the amount of water that is used by that sector in relation to total water usage in the country. In 2018, Trinidad and Tobago's estimated water use efficiency was $58 per cubic meter, as compared to the global average of $18.9 per cubic meter. This table shows indicator values for a few Caribbean countries, as well as the United Kingdom and the United States. From these numbers, you will observe that Trinidad and Tobago's water use efficiency is 3 times the global average, and this may initially give a false sense of comfort. However, it is important to keep in mind that water use efficiency is a partial indicator and needs to be viewed in conjunction with the 10 other SDG indicators as mentioned earlier, in addition to considering the circumstances that exist in the water sector of the particular country. This brings me to how relevant is the concept of water use efficiency in Trinidad and Tobago. You would have heard Mr. Mead mention that Trinidad and Tobago is not a water-stressed country. Well, in water-stressed countries, where rainfall levels are extremely low and freshwater resources very limited, water use efficiency is critically important. Since Trinidad and Tobago is not water stressed, does that mean that we should not be concerned about water use efficiency? The answer lies in examining other circumstances within the local water sector. The water utility in Trinidad and Tobago experiences significant challenges in meeting the country's daily water demand. On average, over the period 2016 to 2019, demand exceeded production by 10%, or 38 million cubic meters per year. In 2019, roughly 40% of customers received 24/7 supply, which meant that 60% was on scheduled supply. Both situations have remained largely the same to present day, as you would have heard the minister also give some indicator of the current circumstances. WASA's inability to meet water demand can be attributed to some key factors, including high levels of non-revenue water, which is approximately 50%, when a reasonable target for developing countries, according to the World Bank, is between 20 to 25%. WASA has an aged and inefficient network infrastructure. One indicator of this is the number of pipe breaks per kilometer of line per year. WASA experiences approximately 4.3 pipe breaks per kilometer per year, when a well-maintained pipeline distribution network has less than 1. Trinidad and Tobago has high per capita consumption, estimated at 440 liters per capita per day, coupled with low metering of 4% in total, comprising all of the industrial customers metered, 50% of commercials, and 1.8% of residential customers metered. My colleague will speak more about water metering in the presentation that follows. These are long-standing issues that will take time and significant investment to improve. This places greater focus on short-term changes that can be made by using water more efficiently across all sectors of society. However, there are some challenges in Trinidad and Tobago that we cannot ignore. Trinidad and Tobago in general is yet to develop a culture that sufficiently embraces water efficiency. I emphasize in general because there are many people who have historically been on intermittent supply who understand, literally, the need to value every drop. However, the population as a whole has not widely embraced the concept of water use efficiency. And there are some fundamental issues that have contributed to this culture. For instance, the National Integrated Water Resource Management Policy has not been formalized and therefore remains to be implemented. Recently, the Ministry of Public Utilities indicated that the National IWRM policy will go out for public consultation shortly. So that is something to look forward to. In addition, there are no national targets and standards for efficient water use, which would enhance public awareness. By national targets, I mean baseline daily per capita water use targets and baseline commercial, industrial, institutional targets. There are no dedicated financing mechanisms to support water use. Let me say that again. There are no dedicated financing mechanisms to support water use efficiency, such as low or no interest loans for water quality enhancement projects, reuse water projects, and groundwater preservation projects. There is no national water loss reduction program that is aimed at reducing the amount of water lost primarily through leaks in the distribution network. And last, but by at no means least, Trinidad and Tobago's low water rates relative to other jurisdictions. Rates that do not reflect the true cost of water undermine conservation and efficient water use efforts and contribute to the high per capita water consumption levels that exist in Trinidad and Tobago. Just to give you a sense of how Trinidad and Tobago compares regionally in terms of water rates. From this graph to the top, you can see that the tariff per cubic meter for Trinidad and Tobago is 31 cents US. Only Suriname has a lower tariff in the region. To put this in perspective, you can buy a 500 ml bottle of water from a retail store in Trinidad and Tobago for just about the same price that you can buy 264 gallons of water from the utility. Looking at the average residential monthly bill for water in the region, once again, Trinidad and Tobago is amongst the lowest in the region, along with Suriname. It is important to note that this graph represents metered rates. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, 96% of the population is unmetered. Therefore, the vast majority of residential customers pay a flat rate, which works out to between $5 and $15 US per month. This is still very low when you consider average monthly bills of other countries in the region. I would now like to share some proposals for advancing water use efficiency in Trinidad and Tobago for various stakeholders. Recommended actions for government are as follows. Prioritize the promulgation and implementation of the national IWRM policy, and keyword is prioritize. Again, prioritize the creation of the appropriate institutional framework and organizational structures for effective water management, and in so doing, clarify the respective roles of the different institutions. Develop national indicators and targets for water consumption per capita. Develop a national water efficiency plan for Trinidad and Tobago, inclusive of setting targets for the agriculture, industry, and service sectors. Create financing mechanisms to support water use efficiency. Similar to what the minister mentioned, the recently launched initiative by the MPU for the development of rainwater harvesting projects in rural areas. And establish a water efficiency labeling scheme and introduce incentives to encourage the importation and or the domestic production of efficient water devices, such as low flow shower heads and low volume toilet tanks. Recommended actions for the regulator are set tariffs that signal the true cost of water, which includes developing inclining block rates to promote conservation. Ensure that WASA establishes a water conservation and efficiency plan. Develop water efficiency targets for WASA, such as non-revenue water levels, and apply incentives where necessary. Require WASA to raise public awareness of the efficient use of water on a routine basis. Monitor and report on WASA's ability to maintain a consistent and reliable water supply. And continue the publication and dissemination of brochures and various public education and outreach activities that promote water conservation. Information on these activities can be sourced on the RIC's website. In terms of recommended actions for the water utility, commit the authority to fulfill the national IWRM policy agenda, establish a water conservation and efficiency plan, implement initiatives to reduce non-revenue water, such as aggressive leak repair and predictive maintenance programs, implement a universal metering program, capture and report accurate data on water use, which goes hand in hand with universal metering, and promote general education and awareness of efficient water use. Finally, recommended actions for consumers. Educate and share knowledge about saving water through conservation and improving efficiency of use. Install water efficient appliances and devices at home and at work. Employ water efficiency practices on a consistent basis. The key word is consistently, so that the practices become habit. Fix leaks within your premises. Let's start with repairing leaking toilets and water tanks. It sounds simple, but these are small steps towards changing attitudes and behavior. And the last recommendation is reuse water where possible. This may not be intuitive, but it involves things like reusing water that was used to wash vegetables to water plants, or repurpose laundry water for washing down outdoor areas. These options will become more relevant and useful when water meters are installed and tariffs are adjusted to reflect the true cost of water. To wrap up, water use efficiency is one of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore it is on the world agenda for countries to monitor and report on. Trinidad and Tobago may not be a water scarce country, but we have historically not placed a high value on water provided to us by the water utility. Becoming more water use efficient is important for us because of what is on the horizon, including metering and cost-reflective tariffs. There is a role for institutional stakeholders to put the structures and framework in place when it comes to water use efficiency to facilitate the change in culture that is required. However, that change cannot come from the institutions and the water utility only. On a personal level, we all can and need to make changes to how we use water. And with that message, I would like to thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rashid, for presenting clear recommendations for the various stakeholders from the government through to the consumer. We all have our part to play in ensuring that water is used as efficiently as possible and at all times. I wish to thank Dr. Kashman for the yeoman service that he's been doing with our online questions. He's been fielding a lot of responses and providing links to data on GWP's website. So thank you, Dr. Kashman, and look forward to your participation in the panel discussion that will follow after the next presentation. I now welcome Mr. Victor Rodriguez, Standards Engineer at the RIC, to begin his presentation on exploring universal water metering in Trinidad and Tobago. In the meantime, while we get some technical matters sorted out. Okay, we're back on now with Mr. Rodriguez.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the RIC team, my presentation today is on universal water metering, a tool for sustainable water delivery. While there are several mechanisms for sustainable water delivery, inclusive of a well-maintained infrastructure and education and awareness, today I will be discussing the potential impacts of universal water metering if implemented in Trinidad and Tobago. In this presentation, I will provide a brief background on the current state of the water sector and water delivery in Trinidad and Tobago. I'll present the case for water metering along with the associated challenges. I'll then conclude with the options for universal water metering in Trinidad and Tobago. The current state of the water transmission and distribution sector in Trinidad and Tobago is characterized by its relatively high demand for water. In 2020, the Water and Sewerage Authority indicated that the average water production was 218 million imperial gallons per day. However, the utility also estimated that approximately 50% of that production is lost as non-revenue water. This effectively means that approximately half of the water produced by WASA is not being delivered to customers and is lost through leakage and theft. The water distribution sector is also characterized by the high levels of leakage in the network, wastage by customers through inefficient practices, and leakage at their premises. Flat rate tariffs are predominant for residential or domestic customers, as they are billed based on the annual rateable value of their premises. Consequently, there is no incentive to conserve water. And only 4% of WASA's customer base is metered and are primarily the industrial customers. This means that the remaining 96% of customers pay water bills based on the value of their premises rather than the amount of water they consume. This chart represents the ratio of metered to unmetered customers by category. The blue section represents the percentage of metered customers, while the orange represents the number of unmetered customers. As you can see, quite a number of customers categorized as charitable institution, cottage, and commercial are unmetered. However, the number of unmetered domestic customers is extremely high. Notably, there's a total of just over 404,000 unmetered customers in Trinidad and Tobago. Sustainable water delivery can mean meeting the water needs of the present without compromising the ability of future. Keeping this in mind, there are several mechanisms that can be used for sustainable water delivery, which include but are not limited to ensuring that the infrastructure is properly maintained. This includes predictive and preventive maintenance to improve the reliability of supply, implementing tariffs which reflect the true cost of the resource, meaning that customers' bills will accurately reflect the cost of production, engaging in public education and awareness programs on efficient water use that emphasizes it is a valuable and finite resource. And lastly, universal water metering as a mechanism for sustainable water delivery. Universal water metering is the installation of water meters at the premises of all customers for the purpose of billing customers for consumption. It is a fair way of billing customers as they pay for only what they consume. There are several benefits associated with a universal water metering program, including conservation, as it promotes efficient practices as a valuable resource and also alerts customers of leaks and wastage on their premises. Fairness in terms of customers paying for what they use, since metering is the most equitable method for customers to pay in relation to the volume of usage and not according to a system that does not correlate to their consumption. Reduce water consumption in the order of 15 to 50%, coupling universal water metering with a cost-reflective tariff structure, can incentivize customers to reduce their water consumption, since the common tendency is for consumers to relate bills to the amount of water used. This can result in the reduction in the annual operating and maintenance costs for the utility and the deferment of the capital costs for upgrading and expanding water production facilities. Monitoring and management of water resources and the transmission and distribution infrastructure is another benefit. Universal water metering provides the utility with improved monitoring of water delivery. With real-time data acquisition, the utility has the potential for improved response times in managing infrastructure deficiencies to reduce the amount of non-revenue water and therefore save on operational costs, which can be transferred to the customers. As the utility benefits from improved monitoring and management, it will also provide them with the ability to more accurately project future demands for supply and prudently plan for capital upgrades when considering expenditures. Lastly, the saved non-revenue water that we mentioned can be allocated to any growing demands or underserved areas to reduce or remove the requirement for additional water production facilities that further exploit water resources and have negative impacts on the environment. Despite the mentioned benefits and being considered for many years, the uptake of a universal water metering program in Trinidad and Tobago continues to be hampered in many ways as the utility has chosen not to install water meters for all customers. The perceived disadvantages of implementing a metering program relate to high capital costs, as the initial outlay can be prohibitive, dampening any enthusiasm to carry out metering. The anticipated negative reaction, because customers typically view access to water as a right. Implementing water meters may result in customer dissatisfaction and critical reaction, which can be an important consideration for the state. Magnitude of the project works can be quite extensive, as the utilities may not have the adequate human or financial resources to undertake a nationwide project, or may lose momentum due to the duration of works. The loss of revenue, since water rates must not be so low as to negate conservative water use for water meters to be worthwhile. Affordability is also an issue here, as the perception that metering is unfair to some customers, as low-income households with large families have to pay costs that they can't afford. Lastly, intermittent water supply has the potential to damage water meters and provide incorrect readings depending on the technology utilized. While being mindful of the challenges identified, the implementation of universal water metering to properly account for water usage provides opportunities to reduce demand and forestall the need for high capital expenditure to develop new sources of water. The benefits of implementing universal metering clearly appear to offset its disadvantages and should therefore be seriously considered. Some items to consider for the implementation of universal water metering include the rates for unmetered customers in Trinidad and Tobago, which does not reflect billing based on the amount of water used. For utilities that employ metering charges for the volume of water used by the customer, pricing regimes are generally set to incentivize the more efficient consumption of water. This, however, must be balanced with the customer's ability to pay, while ensuring that the rates are not set beyond what could be considered a reasonable figure. Many state-run water utilities suffer from low revenues and little capital investment. As such, they can have great difficulty in funding large projects, such as a universal water metering program, which can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Creative and unique methods of funding are therefore required. Customers' attitudes have been mixed about metering, where water is considered an entitlement rather than a commodity. Customers may be reluctant to accept metering, as they perceive it to be an attempt to impose higher tariffs. However, unmetered customers in the United Kingdom who pay high rates due to the value of their properties and who use small amounts of water, such as couples or elderly persons, welcomed water metering, as it resulted in lower bills. Locally, evidence seemed to suggest the same, as a number of customers have reported a reduction in their bills after switching to metered billing. Other customers may be suspicious of metering, as they fear high charges if meters are installed. This may be the case where there is high personal usage for swimming pools or inefficient water use. 4 technical options can be considered with respect to relaying readings from suitably equipped meters to the facility where customers' bills will be generated. These include a manual system in which meter readers visit each customer's premises to take readings. A remote reading system where meters are installed with the ability to relay the data to mobile devices to WASA for bill processing, also known as automatic meter reading, or drive-by meter reading. When a reading device is installed in a vehicle and has the ability to automatically collect a meter reading as the meter reader drives past the meter. Installing standalone advanced metering infrastructure for WASA's sole use as an integrated system of smart meters that enable two-way communications between the utilities and the customers. And lastly, utilizing the same AMI network of the electric utility for the transmission and distribution, for the transmission of metering data. This includes piggybacking off the network already utilized by TNTech, where WASA can pay a user fee to utilize TNTech's metering infrastructure. In closing, I would like to thank you all for your attention and hand the floor back over to the moderator.
Thank you, Victor, for clearly highlighting the benefits and challenges to implementing a universal water metering program in Trinidad and Tobago. Viewers, I would really like to thank you for what is a very engaging and lively discourse going online right now on our Zoom platform. And thank you again, Dr. Kashman, for weighing in for us in terms of some of the responses that to some of the questions that viewers have been asking. We shall now begin the panel discussion and also respond to your questions that you've posed, viewers. The panelists that I have on stage with me are Mr. Glenn Kahn, the Executive Director of the Regulated Industries Commission, and Mr. Mead from the Water Resources Agency, and Dr. Kashman will also be joining us online. So I'd like to start with Dr. Kashman and Mr. Mead in terms of one of the questions posed, and even though it's been discussed already in both presentations, what exactly constitutes sustainable water delivery? Mr. Mead, would you like to go ahead?
I'll just go back to the definition that I gave. And this really is to ensure that we have sufficient water at sufficient quantity and quality, both for our present generations and for future generations. So we want to ensure that the water that is needed for various uses of the right amount and the right quality. And that having used it in this present generation, that there is water there also for the needs of future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Dr. Kashman, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. Whilst I recognize what has been said, the focus very much seems to be on ensuring that the consumer or the customer has sufficient access to sufficient water. But it actually, sustainable water delivery, I believe, goes beyond that, because it cannot be sustainable if we take water out of the environment to the detriment of ecosystems and ecosystem services, which maintain our ability to keep on supplying into the future. So sustainable water delivery is also part and predicated on sustainable water management. And that means recognizing that we are only one of those consumers, that the environment is a consumer, and then we break that down. It's not just customers, it's the agricultural sector, it's the health sector, and it's a lot of others besides. So it's ensuring that we can meet now and into the future the legitimate needs of each of those customers. In some constitutions around the world, the nature is recognized as a legitimate consumer of resources as well, and their needs are protected. The South African Constitution, for example, is one of those. The other aspect of sustainability is being able, and it's been touched on, to maintain those services at a level that we can meet the legitimate needs of consumers and customers. So making sure that our infrastructure is fit for purpose, that it is operated and maintained to be able to achieve those ends. So sustainable water delivery encompasses, for me, all of those aspects. And that is actually one of the reasons why it is so difficult to manage. So that's my take on it.
Thank you very much. One of the questions coming in is in terms of the costs. So what are the relative costs of producing potable water from groundwater systems, from freshwater systems, from desalinated systems. I don't know if Dr. Kashman or Mr. Mead would like to respond to that, so viewers can get an idea as to what are the relative costs in terms of the production of water from these different sources.
Mr. Mead, do you want to kick off with that?
Well, I don't have those figures offhand at the moment. I did have them at one time some years ago, but those figures, those would have changed. But so I just.
But at least we can highlight to viewers what would be the most expensive to the least expensive. Yeah, I think we would all agree what that should be.
Well, relatively speaking, surface water, because of the treatment and so on, and it tends to be you tend to have a more you need more treatment. Quite often with groundwater, once it's not polluted and you don't have at least for Trinidad, that is usually the main issue would be iron in some areas. Other than that, you could just simply chlorinate and put on the street.
Just to expand out on what Mr. Mead has said, I agree totally with what he said, but it depends on the amount of treatment that you have to put in place to ensure that the water is fit for purpose. It also depends on how much infrastructure you need to put in place to transfer or distribute the water from where it is produced, whether it is a surface water resource.
Okay, we seem to have lost Dr.
The
Kashman.
find is
okay,
that as you go, as we need more water and we need to tap into resources that are further away, the cost of production, whether it's from groundwater or from surface water, tends to increase. So there isn't really a simple answer to this. It does very much depend on a number of factors that you have to take into consideration. And then when it comes to charging a customer or customers, you have to think about, well, am I going to charge a customer the cost of supplying just them, or am I going to distribute those costs across all my customer base? This is not it sounds like a simple question, but there are a number of ramifications that need to be considered when coming to a figure.
Thank you. I want to continue with you, Dr. Kashman. Given your extensive experience and research, how can you illustrate to us what are the effects that a country experiences when it transitions from a status of a healthy water supply to becoming water stressed and maybe even to the state of water scarcity? Because I think we in the Caribbean tend to take for granted the fact that we have water, even though some people may not get it delivered directly to the houses and on a reliable schedule. But in terms of an overall country and what experiences that brings about in terms of what then our governments and various parties forced to do when a country transitions to that water scarce or water stressed state.
Well, I think one of the things to realize is that these are things that do not happen overnight. If we look at, let's take examples of some of the consequences, and I think we can use droughts, which we do experience, as examples of the sorts of stress that come onto our systems. Now, some of this evidence is anecdotal, but for example, during severe water droughts where water is restricted to domestic consumers, there are social effects. Sometimes relationships in the household have been shown to deteriorate. I'm not going to go into details of that because it's not really my area, but there's evidence that it does impose stresses on family where, because of drought, industrial and commercial activity drops away, we've seen this during the pandemic as well, it means that household incomes are affected. Households then need to look for alternative water sources. Sometimes we see this after disasters. Sometimes if water's cut off, we turn to less safe water sources of water. So there are a number of effects that we see manifesting themselves, not just in the household, but across the productive sectors that have to be taken to. One of the ways that we try, or countries try to deal with this, is to look at how you prioritize who gets water. And that is a very difficult position, because you don't want to shut down economies. Barbados is often said to be a water scarce country. And I have some issues about the way we use these terms, water scarcity, and what they're based on, because 95, 99% of the time, you can turn the taps on in Barbados and you will get water. So how is this water scarcity being really manifest? It's something that creeps up over time. What we need to do is we need better planning. We need to be looking further into the future about what the effects of climate change, what the effects of our economic development are, what our water needs are in relation to the resources that are available, and plan and put in the infrastructure that we need. That is not to say that we don't need to maintain our water infrastructure. It's not to say that we need to look at managing our water infrastructure better. And certainly the use of water metering, and I'm not talking about water metering in terms of charging a customer, I'm talking about water metering in terms of a tool to manage the way our systems are operated. That is a growing area, and I think the use of information and communication technology is going to have, if we take it up, a very big impact in the way that we are able to manage our systems. But it is going to take time to bring that in. It's not something that's going to make an impact in 1 year, or it's more like, I think you're looking at more like 5 years or beyond before you really start to see some of the benefits that from the management and operational point of view. So those are just a few ideas around the impact of water scarcity and some of the things that we can do to try and address them. But it's recognizing that we will have an issue and starting now to plan for the next 5, 10, 30 years.
Thank you. Mr. Mead, you presented some somber projections with regard to the level of rainfall we can expect locally in a dry year and by 2050 onwards. What are some of the measures you think would be needed to be taken in the short or long and medium term to mitigate against the effects of those projections?
The first thing I would say is we need to be measuring rainfall, measuring our resources, surface water, groundwater, and continuously measuring these to in order to be able to detect these trends, these expected trends. So continuous monitoring, I would say, would be extremely important. Secondly, we need to begin to put into place what is required to mitigate the impacts, such as one, for example, I would suggest would be storage. In terms of storage, our storage is extremely low, I would say, when compared to other countries. We are not blessed really with a lot of natural storage, except for groundwater, of course. The other area of storage would be our dams. And beyond this, we really need to look at how much storage we do have. And we need to increase that storage. Of course, we do have storage at the individual level, which is at homes and so on. So that could be augmented, as well as storage at the service providers level. We also need to look at as we've been mentioning throughout the discourse today, we need to look at our level of consumption. The individual consumption at the homes, the individual consumption. We need to bring that in line with norms, international norms. We are, in fact, using a bit too much water individually, and that needs to be addressed. It's one thing to say we have a lot of water, yes, but the other thing is there's a lot of wastage of that resource that is taking place. And it costs to treat water. As we heard earlier on, it costs to treat water. And we need to look at those. So those would be some of the things I would say that need to be addressed.
So moving on from that, a lot of our viewers have been commenting on the level of service that they get, in terms of some are not getting at all. So that even though the country as a whole is not water stressed, a lot of the comments we're getting is that viewers would cite their situation as being water stressed. So that given the need to extend the coverage of potable water across Trinidad and Tobago, and also the level of service, what effects do you foresee can occur from actions that would take to improve that service from the Water Authority, and what should be considered to mitigate on any negative effects? So I know you've talked about storage in a global picture in terms of larger storage systems and so forth. But if it is that, we do improve the distribution of potable water to consumers, do you see any potential of it putting a further drain on what is presently being produced?
If I get the question correctly, I would actually say no. I think, and I think this has come out both in what the minister has said and in what other speakers have said, that we do have quite a substantial amount of water. Management is the issue. And what we need to do is to manage that resource, manage what we're producing properly. And which goes back to all of the initiatives that were mentioned in terms of reducing non-revenue water, changing the public attitude towards the value of the resource, and all of those would once brought together, I think that the problem would be solved, and there is no real need to in fact, there are some persons who believe that that the problem is more of a systems problem, that we need to manage the system, and once the system is managed, that we would be able to provide, meet the needs of each individual, and we won't have those issues that we're talking about. But I always like to emphasize the balance on both sides, which is the demand side and the supply side. This is an equation. It's not one at fault more than the other. I think we have to get it right on both sides, both the consumption side and the supply side.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
and I agree.
Totally
Dr.
agree
Kashman,
with
you
that.
wanted to weigh in? Okay. Dr. Kashman, one of the Dublin principles is that women play a central role in water management. What measures or activities have you seen been implemented in countries to promote this principle, and what can possibly be considered by countries in the Caribbean?
I think it's interesting that you should be asking a male to comment on the role of women. I'm on exceedingly shaky ground here. But let me try and offer perhaps a few reflections, and I am more than happy to be put in my place over this. I think if we look in general, there is a disparity between the level at which women are able to progress within organizations and are given responsibility. That in itself, addressing that in itself, I think would be a step in the right direction. the other thing, it does vary. I mean, if you look at where this concept came from, it has different meanings in different parts of the world, I think. And in the Caribbean, what we have seen in the Caribbean, and it's particularly what we've seen during the pandemic, actually, is that with the impact of the pandemic on households, we've seen a reversion to the role, to a traditional role of women in the household, and what has been expected by male society of them. And some have commented that the pandemic has put back the advances in gender equality by several years, by starting to reinforce some of the gender stereotypes that we had, that we were overcoming. You know, I know that in some countries, women do play a significant role in management, and I think that needs to continue. I'm going to leave it there because, as I say, I feel somewhat uncomfortable in entering into an area where fingers could rightly be pointed.
Okay, thank you. One of our questions that was fielded is a long one, so I'll read it. With climate change and increasing rainfall variability, we can expect more of our water to come in heavy rainfall events.
Mm-hmm.
If we continue to pump stormwater into the sea, which will we regret this approach eventually during the more severe droughts that we are expected to occur. It also has financial implications as desalinated water has much higher production costs. In light of this, what consideration has been given to the management of stormwater as a resource to drive water retention and groundwater recharge, as opposed to sending it to the sea only to retrieve it later at a greater expense? Mr. Mead?
Well, this comes back to the point I mentioned earlier on, which is a need for more storage. More storage means that you're able to capture that water before it gets to the sea. But I also like to add, and I'm sure that that I will get agreement, and that is that water going to the sea shouldn't always be seen as a bad thing, because as it moves through the watercourse, makes its way down into the wetlands, it sustains life within those areas. It gets to the coast, it dilutes the salt water, and it creates an environment for certain various species of animals and so on, flora and fauna. So, but yes, it is true to say that there's quite a lot of water. We said in the presentation that over 75% of the water, fresh water, is actually in streams. So we do need to capture that. And it also, I would also add to it, the whole question of rainwater harvesting also lends itself to that. So that at the level of the home, at the level of institutions, schools, we've installed some rainwater harvesters at schools, for example, through a program that we have called the Adopt a River program. And that has worked in those schools where it was provided for, have helped the schools to be more, to have classes for longer hours, for example, and to be able to overcome the effects of water shortages that they may be experiencing. So I would say rainwater harvesting, and I will also say increasing storage.
Mm-hmm.
Should help.
Dr. Kashman, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, in some ways, you could say that rainwater harvesting is a facet of stormwater management. Mm-hmm. It's managing. I think you mentioned the potential impact of climate change and the changes in precipitation patterns, more intense rainfall. I think that is beginning. That is an issue. as Mr. Meads has said, it is natural for there to be runoff. Nature and our ecosystems depend on water falling, water moving through the landscape into the marine environment. And if we interfere too much on that, then we start to have adverse effects on an unintentional effects on our ecosystems, which we don't want. What I think the problem with stormwater is too much at once. The other point about it is that whilst it may seem like a really good idea, and I do think it is a good idea, to harness stormwater where it makes sense, remember that this, because of the intensity of runoff, it will pick up more sediment. It can pick up other pollutants and contaminants as well. So in considering what we need, what it could be used for, we need to consider the quality of that water as well. So whilst it sounds like on the face of it, this is a no-brainer, we need to be aware of some of the ramifications that accompany it. It's not always possible. Barbados, if you will allow me, has started to look at how stormwater could be managed and be utilized for managed aquifer recharge. But even that, in a country that has practiced it for many decades, is not without its problems. So I'll just leave it at that. I'd just like to complicate matters and get people thinking about what they're talking about, and as a starting point, rather than just saying this is a solution.
Yes, and you've also pointed out online that it needs to be complemented by appropriate codes of practice, capacity development of those who install and manage systems, and how aspects such as water quality and public health are managed. So you did point that out online.
Yes.
So I would like to just close off on this part of the questioning to Mr. Mead. It's being asked online whether or not rainwater harvesting is legal in Trinidad and Tobago. And what I would also like to add to that is, are there any guidelines or policies governing it presently in Trinidad and Tobago?
So my response to this would be that it's an emerging area. It has been identified in the policy as a tool which could be used and which should be encouraged to augment the water supply in the country. So what I would say is that it's not illegal. We are encouraging its use. And you would have heard about the National Rainwater Harvesting Program that is being implemented by the Ministry of Public Utilities. And we are fully supporting that at the Water Resources Agency. And we're hoping that that would serve as we go to various communities to implement this project, that individual citizens will take it onto themselves to install systems of that sort on their own, and to become self-sufficient in the event of a disaster, in the event that they don't have sufficient water and so on, to be able to collect that water from the rooftop, which is already there, and safely store it and use it for a number of purposes at homes and at schools also.
Mr. Mead, we've been getting quite a few questions from the agricultural community in terms of water, so that I will pose what would have been the first question, but then added to that any other information you have in terms of water for agriculture, you could probably share with us. So it was asked, what is the national plan for providing portable agricultural water for farmers and small food processors? What are there, has it been considered subsidized rates for farmers, rainwater harvesting systems for farmers, desalination water treatment system for farmers? But as I said, additional questions have been asked in terms of farming and agriculture. So anything you can possibly share with our viewers?
So in terms of rainwater harvesting, there's no There's no cost. Now, to abstract water, we do license private abstraction of water from rivers and from the ground. In terms of rainwater harvesting, we really would like to know who's doing it. So we'd really like people to register with us so we know what's happening out there. But other than that, in terms of a charge, no. However, if you are abstracting or would like to abstract water from a water course for agricultural purposes or for industrial purposes, you can apply to the Water Resources Agency of WASA for a license. We will come out and we will investigate, and once everything is okay, you will be given a license. For that, in those cases, there is a fee. It's small. It really isn't a substantial amount of money. And in the case of agriculture, it's reduced. So that is available. In terms of the potable water, that would be a matter more for the for WASA. I think that can be provided also. There are also some issues in terms of how far away you're from a transmission main, a distribution main, and so on. Some of those issues come to bear.
I have a technical question here. During the last 3 to 4 years, the water energy power nexus approach has gained traction as an alternative or complementary approach to IWRM. Has this approach been considered? So that first we could probably have Dr. Kashman, if he is knowledgeable about it, just share a little bit of insight into it for us. And Mr. Mead, if he knows anything locally on the ground of its implementation or approach being gaining traction, he could then weigh in. Dr. Kashman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that one. Well, before I go into the water, food, energy nexus, just to say that there's been, over the last 30 odd years, there's been a lot of debate about what integrated water resources management means, what it is it a process, is it a policy, are it principles? I think that sort of debate it's academic and it doesn't really make it's about sensitizing people. The water, food, energy nexus to me is complementary to integrated water resources management, because what are you talking? You're talking of integrating the water into agriculture, into food production, into energy production. I think it is complementary, and I think not only complementary, I would say it is part and parcel of integrating across sectors. What we find is that different terms come to the fore from time to time to address or seem to address a particular issue that has come to the fore. And I think the water, energy, food nexus came to the fore, if my memory serves you correctly, around the time that we had that spike in food, in the cost of food, and it was globally, and it became a matter of global concern. And I think this is one of the reasons why that was picked up on. As long as for me, it's what are we trying to achieve? We are trying to achieve the sustainable use of our water resources in such a way that everybody has access to a sufficient quantity and quality to satisfy their needs, whether those needs are in the domestic sphere, whether they're in the energy sphere, whether they're in the agricultural sphere, not only now, but into the future. And that is our goal. That is what we're working towards. In GWP's terms, a water secure world. And water security means that everybody is secure, whether it's for food production, whether it's for energy production, whatever. So that is my perspective on it. I think getting hung up on should it be this or should it be that can if we let it take over, be counterproductive. But that's just my personal view.
Thank you. Mr. Mead, has there been any
Well,
discussion locally?
The only thing I would add to what was just said is that, you know, a number of terms emerge all the time. Go to conferences, you go to, you know, in discussion, terms emerge. But the point that was just made, which I agree with, is that the focus should really, and will always come back to, you know, sustainability in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of food. You'll always come back to that. And they're all interrelated, all interrelated. There's no way, you know, you think of one, yes, at one time, the emphasis is thinking of that, but they're all interrelated. And they really should be, you know, there comes a time when you have to really look at all together. I mean, we're talking about water right now, but, you know, water doesn't get to you without energy. You need food, and you need water for food. You need energy for food, and so they're all interrelated. So that's what I would say. In terms of if there are any specific initiatives, I'm really not aware of any, really.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Khan, I know I've been leaving you out of the discussion, but the minister highlighted that the RIC is supposed to be actively looking at rates, water rates right now. So I don't know if you'd want to share with the viewers what work the RIC is doing right now so that they may have a perspective as to expect any changes in that regard.
Well, we're not at this point looking at the rates. What we have done thus far is to produce a number of technical papers, some for public consultation, some for information purposes. And all of these are on the RIC's website, and any member of the public can look at these and see the ideas that we have put forward in relation to some of the things that we'd like to see in respect of WASA and how they deliver water to the population. The minister did say that within the coming weeks, he expects that the business plan, cost of service study, and so on will come to the RIC. So it is only after that that we will commence any analysis of the document with a view to price, what the price reviews would look like.
Okay, thank you. I now welcome our panelists to share their closing thoughts based on today's discussion and the comments, questions, and concerns shared by our viewers. In the following order, Dr. Kashman, followed by Mr. Mead, and ending with Mr. Khan. Dr. Kashman.
Thank you for that. I really enjoyed the discussion, both just now and the number of questions that have come up in the chat and the question and answer session. And I think it's indicative of the way in which water has moved up in importance in the minds of the public, not just in the minds of professionals such as you and I. I would like to compliment the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the government on the initiatives that it has been taking in improving the management of the water sector. I will be very, very interested to see how the Regulated Industries Commission look at WASA and its tariffs. I think that will be extremely instructive for the rest of the region. And I do think that the rest of the region should be paying attention to this, because it is something that the setting of water tariffs tends to be done in what I would say is a not very transparent manner in many jurisdictions. So I think that's going to be really instructive. What my closing observation would be is that things are never as simple as we would like them to be. It's all a good solution comes usually with some downsides. There are winners and losers, and it's the manner in which we deal with and accommodate the winners and losers that sets us out as either a just or an unjust society. The water tariffs, the use of water meters is a potential example of that. And I will just leave you with this thought. Many jurisdictions think that rising block tariffs for water are a really good idea, even when you have a baseline or baseline amount that you charge. However, if you're a low-income family with 4, 5, or 6 people within your household, a rising block tariff may be socially inequitable. How we deal with that will speak to how we are as a society, and I would leave that thought with my friends at the Regulated Industries Commission and also with WASA as well. But I compliment everybody today on their presentations. It's really been instructive for me and very encouraging. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kashman. Mr. Mead?
I'm extremely happy to see that water is now being mainstreamed as an issue in this country. We have in fact moved quite some way, perhaps not sufficient, but we are making those strides. And of course, I also want to compliment the RIC really for taking this initiative to bring this whole issue of sustainable water delivery to the fore. Having said that, in closing, I'd really like to emphasize that, we are all in this together, every citizen, the service provider, the consumer, we're all in this together. And we all have our parts to play. And as I mentioned before, you have the demand side, you have the supply side, you have the protection of the resource. We also have to recognize that water is required for almost every aspect of our lives. I could safely say every aspect of our lives. And that extends not only to us as individuals, but it extends to the ecosystem, it extends to the plants, the animals, all of that requires water. So that this coming together, this recognition that there are other users, there are multiple users, multiple, not just us as humans, but also, the whole other life forms which require water, and that we all need to work together to ensure that we have, the kind of water delivery that we would need. And the thing is, the resource is there. It's there. Management is what is required.
Thank you, Mr. Mead and Mr. Khan.
Yeah, I'd like to just look at 2 points mentioned by Adrian and Keith. Adrian was talking about the transparency in terms of water, setting water rates. Let me assure him that the RIC fully accepts that approach, and we engage fully with all stakeholders to ensure that the decision that we come up to in the end is representative of all inputs, right? That's one thing. In terms of what you said about the rising block tariffs and whether people on low incomes would be able to afford water, that is also a concern for us. We have to ensure fairness and that all people have access to water. So you can rest assured that when we consider WASA's tariffs, those things will be part of what we look at. With respect to what Keith said about all of us are in this together, I fully endorse that. It can never be about WASA alone or about the government alone or about the RIC or consumers alone. All of us must play our part in it. I mean, when I look back to where we have come in terms of water delivery, I don't know how many people in the room here are listening used to go to a standpipe to collect water. But I did that for many years as a boy, and people hardly ever do that now. And the fact is that water rates have not kept pace with the improvements in the delivery of water. So, the population has to become aware of the fact that the cost of producing water just has moved from many years ago. And they have to, understand that something must be done. And if sustainability and, acceptable level of service is delivered to them, they ought to have to be able to recognize that they must pay a little more. Perhaps that's where we're heading.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. At this time, we've come to the end of this part of the program. And I'd like to thank you, viewers, for your attention and participation. The numbers have remained over 100 for the entire duration of the webinar. So thank you yet again for such great support for the RIC's webinars. Any questions that we have not answered will be responded to via the RIC's online platforms. I now hand over to Drizel to continue.
Thank you very much, Connor. Let me start by expressing my sincere gratitude on behalf of the Regulated Industries Commission to the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, Minister of Public Utilities, for taking the time today to share his thoughts on the government's position and commitment to addressing the issue of sustainable water delivery in Trinidad and Tobago. This morning, we also heard from the distinguished presenters and panelists about the challenges of ensuring sustainable water, the opportunities available, and the actions necessary to combat this issue. I would sincerely like to thank our presenters and our panelists, Dr. Adrian Kashman, Mr. Keith Mead, Mr. Rishi Maraj, Mr. Victor Rodriguez, for their thought-provoking and well-developed presentations and the very lively discussions we had this morning. I would also like to thank Mrs. Dawn Callender, our RIC chairman, and Mr. Glenn Khan, our executive director, and of course, our moderator today, Mr. Cornell Motley, for their significant contributions to this event. To all our attendees, I say a special thank you all for joining us this morning, for your most insightful questions and your participation here today in our webinar. As our presenters would have said this morning, water is one of the planet's most important resources, and access to a sufficient supply of daily water to sustain life is a human right, as identified by the United Nations and, of course, every single speaker here today. While policymakers and utilities have a significant role to play in sustainable water delivery, each of us can also play a part, which is also a message received by all our presenters today, by ensuring that we personally use water more responsibly. Responsible water use can include developing water conservation habits in our daily lives and also ensuring that we use water more efficiently. Efficient water use, as mentioned by Mr. Maraj, can simply be using our domestic wastewater from washing fruits and vegetables to water our plants or flush our toilets. I know all our presenters gave us a lot of food for thought this morning on sustainable water on a local, regional, and even on a personal level. And I think the message today is together we can make it happen. As we close, I would now like to take this opportunity to share that the RIC is also hosting a water conservation mascot design competition for children ages 7 to 17. And if we have any interested parties, you can visit the RIC's website and social media pages for more information. Thank you all again for attending. On behalf of the Regulated Industries Commission, I would like to wish you all a joyous, happy, and holy Easter weekend. Thank you and have a wonderful day.